As if things couldn't get any worse, you know what? Santos ends up having its biggest crisis ever. Let's be honest, that's exactly what it is. A team that ends up being relegated for the first time ever because of economic and administrative issues is exactly that. Maybe it's not the ideal way to handle things, but it is a way to handle things anyway. The fact that they have one of the first moves that they decided to make was to not have anyone wear the vaunted number 10 jersey until they go back to the first division. Is it something that shows leadership? It's hard to say. I wouldn't go as far as making it wow, what a ballsy decision that is. What a brave and courageous step forward it is to try and rectify something that needs to be rectified. That being said, it's more of a case of symbolism, of giving respect and reverence to the history of the club, and knowing that there's certain things that you're saying to the players that are remaining and the players that will come during the upcoming transfer windows, is that at this point in our history, at this point in the year 2023, and of course going into 2024, there's no one, absolutely no one, worthy of wearing the number 10 jersey. No one. And it's not me saying it. It's the positioning of the club. It's the positioning of the fan base. And more importantly, it's the positioning of the situation itself. Is it the top priority? No, it isn't. But it is something that positions and postures the administration, the board, the club president in a position where, and pardon the redundancy, it's just trying to get this thought out, ends up having you make twists and turns where, in order for people to understand the severity of the issue, you have to start going back and forth in sidewinding into different concepts and different notions. It's not the most courageous. It's not the most, innovative of ways to get a solution or start to look for solutions. But it is the easiest one. It is the easiest one. There's really, at this point, what is there to do a week after your team was relegated? Very little. Maybe start to restructure contracts. Maybe just let contracts run out. Maybe start looking at new players. Maybe start looking at even a new coach. Yeah, all of that ends up being the most pertinent at the moment. So, But when in terms of pertinence and in terms of urgency, well, sometimes the least important ends up being the most important because it positions you well. It says, well, okay, now we know what the team is looking for and we know what the expectations are going into 2024 for a team in the second division in Brazil. In a position where all of a sudden you go from the richest league in all of America to a second division where it's amongst one of the most combative, it's one of the most intense, it's one of those that you have a great deal of travel to do in a very complicated manner. No longer are you flying in a more comfortable or least uncomfortable manner. No longer are you just flying on charter. Sometimes you have to drive in buses. Sometimes you have to go in and maybe not take the most convenient manner, the most convenient method to a game. And that will be very trying for certain players at Santos, especially the ones that are willing to stay and endure the enduring humiliation that will be playing in the second division. Let's not kid ourselves. Just because they got relegated and just because they will play in the second division next year, and they have to wait until May to do so, because obviously they'll have to endure the entire Paulistão tournament having to be told that they're a second division team by Palmeiras, by Corinthians, by Sao Paulo, by many of the teams, the other teams in the Paulistão. And that will be kind of an enduring torture. Maybe it ends up being one of those, like Marcelo Bielsa said once, you have to swallow the venom. You have to see what it does to you. It does it kill you? Does it make you stronger? It ends up being exactly that for Santos going into 2024. And obviously the name that everyone wants to mention is Neymar. I doubt that that's going to happen because Neymar can't even play until after Copa America, probably, knowing the injury that he suffered. So to come back immediately from an ACL injury after being out for months and being the player that's responsible for the salvation of your team, knowing that he'd have to come on a loan basis, he'd have to sacrifice a great deal of time and make a great deal of personal investment into doing so. Now, it would make the Brazilian Second Division must-watch TV. That will be for sure. But if there's one thing that you start analyzing with Santos is that there's no money. And again, as I mentioned before, this team is just so far, so distant from the version that was 2020, 2021 when they ended up getting to the final of the Libertadores, to seeing this team. And not, mind you, at that point, the final of the Libertadores was already covering and papering over many cracks that were already beginning to show themselves. So when you look at what happens from that point to now, it's a team that, of course, had to be saved not once but twice. The third time ended up not being the charm. And the fourth time, well, hopefully there isn't, but if you want to consider next year the fourth time, it'll be an interesting cavalry. I don't want to say cavalry. An interesting cavalry for Santos and the fans of Santos, who have endured a great deal of disappointments, more disappointments than illusions, more disappointments than positivity over the past 2.5, almost 3 years. We shall see. We shall see, ladies and gentlemen, how Opeixe ends up doing. But for the meantime, not having the number 10 worn, having the number 10, I guess, basically retired, ends up being the first step. Maybe a good one, maybe a bad one, I don't know. But it's something that at least you're seeing the board say, you know what? Right now, nobody is going to be worthy of wearing that jersey, a jersey that, of course, one of the greatest players of all time wore, amongst many others. Basically saying, you know what? Once again, it's going to be about earning your way onto this team, earning your way into the legacy of this club, and earning everything you can when you're wearing the white jersey of Santos.